just so you guys know, we have invited some of our local ranchers here to join us, because one of the things that we want Doyel to help us do is see what we can do to protect our ranchers and their grazing rights going forward, because we all know there's an all-out assault on that activity. So we've had a bunch of people change in the room here real quick, and people that came in late and missed the introductions, and Mr. Ruth joined us. And anyways, so if we could just real quick, let's run around the room real quick and do a quick introduction of everybody. Doyel asked to do that again. Supervisor Weller and them didn't make it, so Shannon.
I'm Shannon Bushman. I'm from Marysville.
Doug Heaton, Kane County Commission.
Peter Ogden, Sevier County Commission.
Gary Mason, Sevier County Commission.
Gordon Thomas, Sevier County Commission.
Leo Canal, Beaver County Attorney's Office.
Scott Albrecht, the Commission Assistant for Beaver County.
Mark Whitney, Beaver County Commissioner.
Mike Dalton, Beaver County Commissioner.
Eric Clark, Washington County Attorney's Office.
Jim Miller, Kane County,
Arizona.
Where are we at now? Me?
You.
Yeah, where are you?
Chad
County Seat TV.
Okay.
Brian Bremner, Garfield County.
Monty Wells, I'm from Salem County, and I do GIS work, my own little business.
Phil Lyman, Salem County Commissioner.
Shane Miller, Paiute County Reporter, Treasurer.
Court, Filing County, your old Paiute.
Keith Anderson, rancher, Paiute County.
Earl Bagley, Extension Service in Wayne, Paiute counties.
Gary Allen, rancher.
And Glade Rancher, representing local Monroe Mountain Grazers Association.
Mike Gaylor, Deputy Pike County.
Russ Cowley, 6 County Association of Governments.
Travis Keel, 6 County Staff.
Rick Blackwell, Paiute County Commissioner.
All right, so now everybody knows who everybody is.
Sure, I memorized it.
You got it now?
Yeah.
Because this is the second time you asked me to do this.
I know.
And there will be a
And
test.
there is a
right?
test. Doyel has to. Yeah. Okay. So, just to let you guys know that just joined us, Doyel Shamley's from Apache County, Arizona. He likes to say that he is an expert at applying the Constitution to local issues and local government issues. And so they've done a fabulous job in Apache County on a number of things. The road closure bills, forest management issues, endangered species acts, preventing them from walking all over their county. They've been really successful at a number of these things. And specifically, what Doyel's, I guess, toolkit consists of is a thorough understanding of how the Constitution gives us the jurisdiction that it does, and how our right as local governments in health, safety, and welfare really give us the basis to do a lot more things than we probably have thought that we are able to do. And so hopefully that kind of gives you guys that just came in a little bit of perspective on why Doyel's here and what we're trying to learn from Doyel. So
Buy me a couple more minutes. I'm getting some water stuff here.
So Doyel's also his big thing as of late is the federal water graph, and you know there's a huge desire federally to acquire as many water rights as they possibly can and control our water. And so Doyel's dug into that in depth. And would you say we're at the beginning of that fight?
A renewal, yeah, because they're going to make another in run using the administrative, because in Congress it was whipped, so they're going to go the other route.
Okay, your 2 minutes is up. Sorry.
Damn it. Okay. Well, what I want to start with
There's
here.
food up here too.
Oh yeah, there's tons of food that.
Tons of food left.
So whoever wants some, go get it. Let me figure out how to get my magic screen back up here. Get that on.
You're gonna have to plug it in.
Oh, that'd help me. Yeah, I ate. Shouldn't have ate. Now I'm half asleep. All right. Let me go back to I want to go back to that waters of the U.S. issue. For the gentleman on the livestock producers that got in right before the lunch, which I know you're used to not getting a free ride because you're not government, but you can certainly partake. There's plenty of lunch left. But that lady said she's going to leave it till like 3. So, but this waters of the U.S., what we were just kind of wrapping up with was that Clean Water Restoration Act and whatnot that Baucus and several others were tangling with a couple years ago. Essentially, they were rewriting definitions, the federal government, on what is navigable waters, et cetera, and what it came down to was many of the agencies had gotten in their head that they had jurisdiction over everything. It got so far as their definitions in that Clean Water Act, Restoration Act, the renewal of it, that the monsoons, like where we live, or up in Wyoming, different situations, like in a prairie dog town, if it held water for 3 days, it was navigable waters. If it was a bar ditch down the side of the road, out of a culvert, it was navigable. So the Fed owned it. And the map done for the congressional hearings, in fact, and I'll show that in a bit, shows current water jurisdiction by the Fed and then future if it passes. And what's happened is because it got whipped in Congress, this is from the 20th, so it's all 10 days old. This article, the EPA is just going to go an administrative route and try to do it for Obama, and it just went to the Office of Management and Budget for review. And basically, they want to use this definition, and by showing that how the waters tie together, I'll show you down here. Okay, this right here, it says, additionally, the EPA has released a draft report, which you can get here. See the little hand here? It'll go there. Of their connectivity of streams and wetlands to downstream waters, which will be used as, quote, the scientific basis needed to clarify Clean Water Act jurisdiction. The map, though, is the same. Basically, the federal agencies claim that they'll have it all. It won't be adjudicated water rights or pre-existing anything. And what's scary about this is, we don't need them owning all the water. Okay, the livestock, the agricultural irrigation users, the cities, whoever. And then there's been water rights that are pre-existing that go back generations. We don't need them playing with changing definitions to get ownership, because they will shut down everybody that produces. Anybody in rural America. And remember what Chief Tidwell said 3 weeks ago, Chief of the Forest Service, that rural America needs to just get over being rural America and face the fact that you're going away. Okay, that's the attitude of your Chief of the Forest Service, okay? So keep that in mind, okay? When 2/3 of the water originate from land that his agency manages. So he's on boat with this other mechanism. Now, I don't know if have any of you heard of that silvery minnow down there in New Mexico and Texas? What it was they're old, from the Spanish land grants in northern New Mexico days, and clear back from the Treaty of Hidalgo, okay, Guadalupe Hidalgo Treaty. Pre-exist statehood of New Mexico, and so do the rights, and they carry forward to this day. They're very important, and they surround water heavily. When we all think of our water rights as being grandfathered in, always. And then, yeah, they come under attack constantly, but certain things seem pretty stable. But water is becoming very unstable, because you can control anybody or anything if you control the water. And in 2010, the irrigation districts that run, this is the 10th Circuit Court, that run through New Mexico and all the way to the Rio Grande, that whole watershed, and down into Texas, got sued. The silvery minnow was introduced into the irrigation canals. Remember, these go back to the Guadalupe Hidalgo Treaty, way before we had a name like New Mexico or Arizona even. Then they claimed it as critical habitat and won. There was 9 appeals by ranching and different organizations, and they lost all 9. And they actually took away all the pre-existing water rights in favor of that minnow and that critical habitat. And it's never been done like that on that type of scale in history. And you'll have squabbles, and there always have been those between cities and counties and states and counties and even next door neighbors over water going back and forth, but never have they stripped whole irrigation districts all the way through the Rio Grande watershed, anything of that scale, and then turned down every set of appeals. So now the greenies think that they've got, and I guess they do to a certain extent, they've got a foothold in court because they like to use that precedent thing. Even though the precedent may be wrong, they like to hang their hat on that. So with that sitting in the court, stripping somebody of pre-existing water rights, which wasn't just cattle, that was mainly irrigation. That's chilies. That's like what you're seeing in California. 35% of the world's food supply is produced in the San Joaquin Valley. Think about that. The world's food supply in one state was produced there. And in the 80s, it was the 8th largest economy in the world. The mayor of Los Angeles and things like that met with the ambassadors and premiers of foreign countries, even though he was only a mayor. That's how powerful they were. And in under 30 years, they're trying to figure out now how to declare bankruptcy. And in the last 2 years, that Sacramento Delta chub has shut off all that water, and it's becoming another dust bowl out there. Most of those people's families came from the dust bowl, and that's how they ended up out there in the first place in California, made it productive. And now it's being gutted, and I was just out there, and the ranches from one end to the other, and the agriculture, as far as crops, are gone. It's dirtier and dustier and deader than I've ever thought I would ever see it out there. So this is a western states issue heavily, but I think the key thing is the ranchers, the livestock producers, I think is a better term, because we don't want to leave the sheep producers out that are getting ate up by wolves too, or the goat and sheep and the West Texas folks who've been really kind to us as well. Clanning up with the counties and sending a clear message to the governors and the state legislators, sending a clear message, and get this message to the East Coast, because the East Coast is very nervous about this every year, this escalating increase in food prices and heating oil costs and gas costs, and most of it comes from out west. And if we can get some of those places back there to understand they do have a dog in this fight, it isn't just a Utah or Arizona issue. If they want to keep paying crazy food prices, then keep letting us sink. And if they want to keep paying too much for heat and oil and natural gas, keep letting us sink. And that's the only thing I can see to kind of get them on board.
Hey, Doyel,
Mm-hmm.
so what's the strategy here? Because the sentence there that bothers me is near the bottom that says, any and all regulatory jurisdictional decisions will be based on the final report. So what is the strategy or effort to stop this one?
Well, right now, you can submit commentary, and in this case, this was a NACO report from the 20th. I have others. Is this the 20th one? Yeah. I can't say that, but whoever. We'll go down to this one. Julie Uffner. What NACO's asking for counties to do is, okay, the normal Federal Register route, like we showed this morning, they are accepting comments on this plan, the EPA. The counties across the U.S. need to be telling them hands off, and the livestock organizations, just get away. We beat you in Congress already, just leave us alone. And this Julie Uffner for NACO, the National Association of Counties, is kind of running a database. And what they've asked is if you send a comment to the Fed, please send her the same one, so they can be gathering them up and knowing what the counties are saying. But the livestock producers, oftentimes they've got so many issues to worry about, they get left out in the wind. But I want to show you some of the methods that we were able to successfully use down there in Arizona that worked out, pretty dang well for us and our producers. Now, one of the things that constantly got in the way of people with allotments up on the, whoa, that's huge. Okay. Was the Mexican spotted owl. So when this management plan came up, and went for review. It was 2011. The county made this substantive comment, and we got with the livestock producers, we got with the timber folks, everybody. And we got with the Fish and Wildlife and made them detail their management plan. What we were able to do in here was to open the door so that the grazing could be put back in the Alpacks, all those protected area corridors, more so than it had been since the 80s. Because the grazers are who can keep that fuel load down, which means it can be a low intensity fire. People can fight it without getting killed. It's manageable. And post-fire, the livestock producers are critical, and they often get left out of the picture. There's almost nothing better or more natural than livestock producers getting back on the land as soon as possible after a big wildfire and getting that soil turned up and getting that germination going again. It's a proven scientific fact. And if you need too many PhD papers to read to help you out, I can email them to you. There are hordes of data already assimilated for that, okay?
They won't let you on right now for 2 to 3 years after a burn on the forest or BLM, at least in Washington County.
No, and see, in our county, not only were all our fences rebuilt, but okay, the evacuation ended at the last week of June, and ours was a record setter, 856,000 acres. All the forest work started on the roads and the fencing, and by fall, no elk hunting units or deer hunting units were impacted, and there were no grazers. Even the Arizona Cattle Grazers was stunned. The Arizona Cattle, Association, the growers and there's food producers and the Arizona Cattle Growers. There's two organizations that are kind of married together. They even in open public testimony gave Apache County the credit for that down at the state capitol. They said because the county put the hammer down on the agency, that's why they were right back up on their rotations. Now, unfortunately, 12 years ago or so was the next largest fire, the Rodeo Chetasky fire, and it didn't involve our county. And there's still permittees 12 years later who don't have fences fixed or are on that mountain. And they've had to completely leave the area and go over across the state to Mojave County, out in the desert, because they couldn't wait no longer. So, I mean, literally neighbors touching borders, that's the difference between sitting back or being proactive. That's the difference. Our two counties touch each other. But we were back on the same year, that fall. So,
What did you do to make that happen?
well, part of it was this. We addressed every species that was going to come up. The spiked dace, the loach minnows, the willow flycatchers, the typical tools they use, frogs and stuff like that. In this case, the spotted owl as well, because this kept people from grazing oftentimes up in the mountain. Anywhere that was a spotted owl area. But remember, the law said spotted owl protected area is 100 core acres only during mating season, May to September. So other than that 100 acres May to September, there's nothing preventing timber harvest, fire suppression activities, or grazing. And by standing on that fact, with the help of the Fish and Wildlife, the managers, and the state director teaching us a lot of these tools, we were able to submit that substantive commentary and win on all that. And the loach minnow and spiked dace. A neighbor county did not team up on that. I gave you that example earlier. 5 New Mexico counties and us, cost shared. So it ran around $1,000, $1,200, but it was divided by 6. So it was very inexpensive per county, $200 per county when it was said and done. But the ones that did not participate lost thousands of acres, and Supervisor Weller, in his first week in office, got to see in the Federal Register, due to the commentary from Apache County, we no longer see a need for habitat in that county. And that's routine. And that was the loach minnow, the willow flycatcher, and on and on. And the counties that have not been active, trying to team up and share information and forces with the livestock and whoever you can garner up, have routinely been pillaged of their rights. So, I mean, I'm glad to see them come in and see how, and everybody see each other. Because the key is going to be to team up. And don't forget us folks in Arizona. We have a lot of, like the Mojave plan I talked about earlier, for a weed, 10,000 acres, but that's their county. But it was also in 2 Utah counties. okay? That, is touching us. So now I'm going to make some introductions this week, later on in the week, so that Mr. Gardner and them know these other Mojave County, Arizona counterparts and start teaming up on these forces to push back. Because a lot of times these are regional plans. They're not just confined to your county. There'll be multiple counties within your state, or they'll cross borders. Us in Catron County, New Mexico gets to work together a lot. So the key here, I really think, is try to, when you have these multi-county hearings, try to get your livestock organization there, like a rep. And we recently did that with that wolf resolution and then ordinance. So the Little Colorado River Predator Control, which is all funded by contributions from ranches. And that funds an APHIS, Wildlife Services Officer, to trap and shoot raccoons, coyotes, whatever. Okay? They came to a meeting at the county seat. And vice versa. We've been to meet with the Director of Ag as a county and the Arizona cattle growers in Phoenix. So try to realize what your assets are in your county and team up on all these and start sharing. Because you folks on the ground know more about that land than almost any of these elected people. And it's just a fact. So when they need some help with some numbers or how AUMs are getting cut, and those AUMs, I strongly believe, because of how successful we were with that Forest Service Appeals Project last year, the national rule, and the Loach Minnow and Spike Dace and all those, I truly believe, since you can directly tie the number of AUMs getting cut to losses in jobs and increases in crime, the counties can use that to take a step forward and defend the livestock producers as well and get some of that back. Because that's what that land's for. And, the county's got the legislative, let's say, hammer, but the guys on the ground have the know-how. So if you combine those two and then feed it all to the lawyers or whatever route you choose to do, I think that's going to be the route here. Because you have not only those minnows, but you've got your spotted owl. You're going to get the western U.S. is going to get a taste of what, let's say, us in New Mexico and Oregon and California got. We had the northern spotted owl and the Mexican spotted owl. Now it's called lesser and greater prairie chicken and sage grouse. And that's what's coming to all these states here. Yes, sir.
So have you seen increases in AUMs in your county?
Yes. In fact, X Diamond Ranch is now, her and the neighboring ranch, I forget the name now, it's her sister actually, across the way is a separate, Slade cattle. Those two ranches are now up there grazing in those spotted owl packs around Greer, and they're proving multiple things. They're proving that the science we put forth was correct. From doctorates in the universities, the rangeland scientist, that's Dr. George Rule at ASU, Dr. Nick Ashcroft with NMSU, they've all proven everything out already. It's just the agencies don't want to listen. So when we showed it, they're showing now all that ladder fuel vegetation isn't accumulating because the grazers are out there around that town of Greer in that case, Badger Creek and Government Springs and Little Colorado watershed. And then at the same time, of course, that gave them a better opportunity for more grass because that's at a lower elevation than the normal summer. The summer stuff up at 9,000 feet and whatnot. This stuff's a little closer at 7,800. So as they're working down to town, in other words, it's giving them more grass. And then they can go to the Tucson areas, which was kind of typical anyway, or down in Deming, New Mexico areas for winter, if they choose to not have to feed. But it has helped. So these plans can happen. You can have as many of these comments as you might need. Loach minnows, owls. I don't really care. And I think I want to show you, and I think I'm going to show you here. Why you want to know your range management schools and cooperative extensions. Remember at one time at least especially, your cooperative extensions were a powerful tool. Okay, the USDA cooperative extension now, like wildlife services, they've been cut to bare bones minimum anymore. But they're science driven, okay? They're not agency driven. These are guys that spend a lot of their time in the field, and they would fit perfectly in this room. Get to know those rangeland specialists. Go seek them out as a county and find them, and find your cooperative extensions out of your ag schools. Every state has an agricultural schools. That comes from Congress from 1823. Every state in the Union has designated agricultural schools. Okay, now maybe sitting on a campus in Salt Lake, but there's some back room that has a couple nice people somewhere. Go find them, because that can be a big tool. And that's what we had to use them a lot. That's culminated in a couple of reports that we need really badly. This is the most recent one. This was just released Thursday from Rangeland Ecology and Management from the SRM, Society for Range Management. Many of you will be familiar with that. And in this case, it's finally, for the first time, well, except in one case, a bona fide report on the indirect and direct effects and implications for compensation for the wolf predations. Okay? Never has it been shown except for one other case, and that was Dr. Nick Ashcroft of NMSU. He runs the Rangeland School of Economics there at Socorro campus. He proved it out, and I have that report also. But if it wasn't for gentlemen like this, that as a county flunky I could call, because we couldn't afford to have them in the county payroll. But I can call and say, hey, I need to do X, Y, Z. What data you got? And they gladly send the white papers and the reports. Okay, just like this one that we just distributed this at the end of this last week to anybody I could think of in our region, and Dr. Nick Ashcroft's. That's the data you need, because that can counter the data that the agencies give out to you when they say, well, our biologist says this, or our terrestrial or our aquatic says this. Well, sorry, but ours says this. So NEPA says you have to consider all the evidence. And also NEPA says, whenever they're doing a report, NEPA requires to use all the newest, best available science. We've all heard that. That also includes the newest. So don't let them do like in our forest plan, where they use 1981 rainfall, which was way bigger than now, to try to justify grass height measurements. You buck them on it. And that's what we're able to do with this new report. This is going to be very handy in the next few weeks on these federal comments they're nationwide. There's a hearing Friday in Albuquerque, the delisting of the wolf in the lower 48. See, we need reports like this because we can show the impacts to livestock producers. And then, of course,
Which wolf?
Huh?
Which wolf?
This is all the programs. So the gray wolf, the red wolf segment, and the Carolinas, the Canadian wolf.
Everything with the Mexican.
Yeah.
I guess that was my question.
Yeah.
Yeah, delisting will be everything but us. So, but there's three things right now going on. Remember, there's the delisting of the gray wolf in the lower 48 states. That's like what part of the hearing is Friday. You also have the modifications to what they themselves term non-essential experimental population of the Mexican gray wolf. What that non-essential experimental means is because they do have 240 head in zoos. That's why they had to be honest by being dishonest. It's non-essential and experimental. They could introduce none in our countryside and the species would still survive. But they choose to introduce them and cause impacts to our tourism, to our game herds. Look what's happened in Yellowstone to the elk herds. That's a conscious choice that those agencies made, even though they don't have to, and their own book says they don't have to. So that's the 10J ruling. That's also, and then right now is also a new draft EIS. This is the third plan for expansion of the Mexican gray wolf population area. So there wouldn't be special introduction areas, which is our backyard and our neighbors, Catron County and us, and then in Greenlee County, so I should include them. But we've had the highest impacts, us and Catron. It would include the whole state seamless. New Mexico, Arizona. But there's a caveat to that. They took West Texas off about February, and in the agency, in writing, because the county caused such a ruckus. Okay, Senator Orrin Hatch helped us from up here, obviously. Big Game Forever and Ryan Benson, who's up here. The Arizona elk, a big pooled effort. The agency during the comment period in writing withdrew the whole plan. But what they did was integrate it in these new ones. Anyway, remember the mouse earlier I told you they keep changing the names on them? That's what they've done here. So what's happened is they have 6 primary release zones in Old Mexico that you're paying for. And they're right over the border from Big Bend, Texas, which is rich with game and everything that the wolves are going to want to eat. So Texas is still going to get them because Kansas has been DNA verified. Coyote hunters got some, thought they were rather big, and they walked up on them after they shot them and realized they weren't coyotes. Those were DNA proved, and that was a Canadian wolf. Now, here's another caveat. When they're doing all this, and the agencies are having meetings with some of us counties, this exact same day, the Fish and Wildlife Wolf Director for the Southwest was meeting with the Center and the Department of Justice cutting another backroom deal. And what they said was, well, we'll expedite a plan, which means by January of 15 we will have a final plan published. The only way to do that is to try to short circuit the system. That means when Washington County and Apache County and Paiute says, well, we want a public hearing here, it's all right, and we want our ranchers to be able to speak on this topic, they're going to short circuit as much as they can public involvement to make that deadline of January 15. Because if we were going to follow the law and science, that damn wolf thing should take 5 or 6 years, quite honestly. It'd be horrible 5 or 6 years, but that's how long it should take if we were really going to do it. Okay? Now, while they're doing that, at the same time the agencies release these wonderful delistings in the lower 48, one of the other things that happened was the Center filed, and the attorneys in here will understand this one real quick, that they filed for injunctive relief. So the same week it was published in Federal Register, they filed for injunctive relief, and it was all the settlements came out. Supervisor Weller was with me when we got the court documents. From filing to settlement with the Department of Justice, 28 days. I've never seen nothing like that. I want one of you counties to try to get something done in 28 days in Washington and back. But they did it for them. And what it said is any of these predators across state lines are automatically threatened and endangered. So being that we know they're in Kansas, we know that their own charts have shown the Canadian ones coming down through Colorado into Utah. If this gets through unfettered, these 3 plans, like this hearing next Friday and actually today in D.C., they're still going to have wolves throughout the West. They can delist all they want because they're delisting this population segment. All the rest of these that cross state lines and float around and are planted with your money in Old Mexico, I can show you the maps. They published them right along all our borders that are going to come north, because if they don't come north, they're going to get shot or eaten down there by somebody. So they're going to have to come north, okay? So you're going to end up with the T&E species in your backyard, no matter what, eating up cattle and livestock and getting water afforded to it and habitat afforded to it. So I think in your case, if someone wants to write it down, I've checked out the species in the West real heavily, and I want to show the livestock producers that chart too. But I can give you a list of your biggest threats that are coming. It's spike dace, D-A-C-E. There's a whole family of daces.
What is that?
It's a guppy. A fish, yeah. I shouldn't say guppy. Looks like one. They're real susceptible to those chlorine tablets you get at the swimming pool supply store. If you drop them in the stream, it wipes them out, and there's no baseline count. But spike dace, loach minnows.
Is the water safe to drink then?
It's pure. Loach minnows are another one.
Makes your lips turn white.
Yeah. The willow flycatcher, and then of course your lesser and greater prairie chicken and your sage grouse. They're going to try to get that across the entire 19 western states. From basically the Dakotas on down west. Now, and it's not helping that we got groups lobbying to get along in West Washington, Western Oregon, and then the Bay Area, California.
How are they gonna get them? Are they gonna just translocate these across through all of our country?
What they're doing is it's kind of a sneaky deal. Remember that chart I showed on the Jaguar that had the 858,000 acres for habitat? What they do is they seek out. So if you and I are an NGO, we will list a filing with a 90-day mandate with the Fish and Wildlife, and we'll say Paiute County has habitat potential for the sage grouse. They have 90 days to analyze it or we can sue them. So they're going to slap together some report that most nobody's going to see, and they're going to try to prove that we're correct, that that hillside out there is suitable habitat. If they deem it suitable habitat, then it now becomes, then they'll file next for critical habitat, and at that point that comes all of your restrictions, because now it's been deemed, whether there's a sage grouse out there or not, it's designated as potential habitat. So it's like having a wilderness area without a wilderness area. We're not going to call it wilderness because Congress didn't approve it, so we're going to call it a habitat study area and short circuit the system and just manage it as such, their own wording.
Well,
And-
you know, and I think a lot of times these organizations that petition listing, they have their own pseudo-biology that they present with them.
Sure.
And I think U.S. Fish and Wildlife, because they don't have time to get good biology, they're accepting that biology as science.
Mhm.
And we know it's slanted.
Yeah, and that's where it's up to the counties and the producers to team up. And don't forget your soil and water conservation districts. I assume you have those in this state. Okay, those are a bona fide state officer. They have pool. Okay, their letterhead isn't just some 5 guys meeting once a month. Okay, when you all clan up and you find these listings in the Federal Register and you're on top of it early, that part of that toolkit he mentioned, and you're in there before the deadline's up with substantive commentary, so you have legal standing for appeals and everything. The way the agencies work is they're only scared of people who have the most appealable writing. Okay, so if they know you were once a good scientist, but you write all over the place in your commentary letter, and they don't feel that they're threatened by it, they're going to ignore it. But if you write a rock-solid substantive commentary that they think they can lose on in appeals, that's when they're going to slow down. And that's the only way you're going to catch them, is teaming up. All these officers in different groups, looking out for each other. Because those gentlemen who work and buy local feed and lots of diesel for their pickups, they are producing that sales tax the county needs to fund that sheriff to go chase the kids who are ditching from the teachers who are also getting paychecks and staying employed. So it's a big mess, but what we got to do is fight fire with fire. Okay, the side that is non-productive, that doesn't want you to have property rights, that doesn't want you to have productivity or be out in rural America, has typically won because they're more organized, they're quicker on the move, and they don't have the moral thing. Like, we can't typically fathom, for the heck of it, writing an uplisting to cut our neighbor's throat on that hill. That's hard for us to just, why do we want to do that tomorrow? So what we have to do is keep our, whatever your thing is with you, morals or whatever it happens to be with you, personally, and as elected officials, we have to fight back with our best tools possible. And it's going to have to be to clan up as like minds. We've got to create those networks. It's got to be those multi-county entities that can start doing the 60-day notice of intent to sue right back. So when a plan gets stopped, what we were asked out in the woods on a tour with state legislators and stuff by senior level forestry officials, was we hear the center is going to litigate this next timber sale, 32,000 acres. If they litigate, would the counties please team up and counter litigate? Issue that 60-day notice of intent to sue based on health, safety, and welfare. That if this timber sale doesn't go on, we are losing jobs. If this timber sale doesn't go on, we're not out grazing because you're going to destroy the landscape. We're not going to have the timber jobs. We've got the fire threat, the water, the air quality, all that. I mean, this is senior forestry people asking this. There's there's good ones everywhere, just like there's good and bad county folks. So when you flesh those out, like your cooperative extensions, and I might suggest that even locally, however that might be, we have this thing that's called ECO, and the name just irks me, but it's Eastern Counties organization. The name ECO just there are 5 of us Eastern counties in Arizona, and the reason for it was to protect and keep going our cultural and historic uses, that agriculture, that timber, that cattle, that copper that built Arizona. And I know you have like a Southern Utah Association and whatnot. I would really strongly suggest that just like that list of names I gave you of critters that are coming up down your throat in this chart that I want to go back to for the livestock producers, that maybe that unit starts with, and get a meeting together, and the issues need to get out on the table. Because I think you're going to find out that a lot of people are on the same boat and didn't even realize it. You're going to find out that weed in Arizona was also in Utah. So you've got an ally over the state line there, and start doing that cost sharing, because we're broke compared to the other side. Remember the Center for Biological Diversity? Throw $1 in the hat. They pass the hat once, they have $250,000. So, and they've got the email things, the wolf comments that ended on the week ago or so, I think it was, Bonnie. Our first one turned in. See the support staff. She's telling me I'm right. Thank you. Here's the Hopi. Here's Apache County, the Hopi Economic Development, the Navajo Wildlife Services, the Hopi Ranch Outfit, the town of Eager, a bunch of people that contracted with me, and I uploaded. I can verify and see they're all in the roster. Our comments are there, and nothing's changed. And then there's 96,000 against us, coming from Walnut Creek, California, coming from Norway, Canada, everywhere else. New Jersey, Pennsylvania, where there are no wolves, or Mexican gray wolf program. So, because they're better organized than us. So here, for the livestock producers, I had showed the counties this morning. Though some of you may be familiar with that Westerner magazine and whatnot, when we got hold of this, we get hold of lots of stuff. This is the Fish and Wildlife's next 5 years of species they're going to list as threatened and endangered and go after critical habitat. So this is through 2017.
Somebody really trying to protect the gopher?
Yeah, 9 of them. 9 pocket gophers. So watch out, because your denim, man, is critical habitat. But butterflies.
I got a lot of critical habitat at my farm.
Yeah. So, well, we just went through that with the mice. And then we had also the narrow-headed garter snake and the northern Mexican garter snake. Came at the same time as the New Mexico jumping mouse and the Mexico jumping mouse that came at the same time as the jaguar. And in the month of June alone, the other side tried to go after 2.1 million acres just in Arizona for critical habitat. Just one state.
So earlier on, you mentioned in relation to critical habitat, the 100-acre pact for Mexican spotted owls. What's the nexus for that connection? Because usually critical habitat says for the whole area, not necessarily the 100-acre where there's packs.
Well, the nexus for that is in their own management plan, that if you can have that May to September, no disruptions with grazing and timber, from May to September for that 100-acre core around their nesting site, that they'll be able to reproduce offspring, so there's no negative effects to the population.
So,
unless you burn them all up.
yeah, and declaring the rest of the area off limits, then it violates that.
Yes.
Okay.
But that's typical. They just burn everything up, or they just declare vast swaths. Like this whole forest is restrained.
Yeah.
So there was the timber sale, I shouldn't say a 30,000 acre timber sale called the Rim Lakes treatment was in the next county over. And I showed the supervisors and our state legislators the letter. It came 2 days in advance from the Center for Biological Diversity, and it said, if you as a Forest Service issue this draft EIS for this 30,000 acre timber sale, we're going to sue because it's next door to spotted owl habitat. Well, first off, how did they send a letter 2 days before anything was released? It's because they have people inside telling them what's coming, so they can already be prepared. And some of us have that, but we need to have more of that, telling us what's coming. Also, they needed to call that bluff immediately. I don't care if the 30,000 acres is next door to the owls. They weren't in there shooting owls, so there's nothing wrong with it. Okay, and they, in their own words, said next door. But they stalled that program for 2 years, and there still hasn't been a tree cut. I had the letter in hand. I gave it to the state legislators. I gave it to that county board of supervisors on behalf of the last administration and this current one, Barry. And they have not heeded our words. And guess what? They still have not cut on that timber sale. Because they don't want to upset their federal partners. That's how it was put to us. But I have to ask, how good are your federal partners when they're cutting your throat? And what's there to save? So for you guys that had to come in late, this list is 500 roughly, and it's just for the next 5 years. There'll be a couple more lists coming out soon. We'll get hold of them. That will list the others to make 1,200 species that were negotiated behind closed doors that the agency promised to have. You see in, I have a bad habit, I was about to point at my screen again, way over here. Full listing and critical habitat, almost on every species. Not maybe we should look at it, they're going to go after the whole enchilada on everything. And a lot of them, like 9 pocket gophers, 2 Sierra plants. That's this one right here. I mean, they're so vague, they don't even have names for all of them yet. But they know they're going after 2 plants in the Sierras. Okay? Now, recently, the agricultural producers in California suffered a major setback, or were about to. And this proves what getting together can do. Many of the western sheriffs in many counties throughout southern Oregon and northern to central California sat through this class last October, a year ago. The northern Yosemite frog, toad, and the spotted yellow-legged frog, I was trying to remember these, got listed. Okay? Went after 2.1 million acres, crossed 9 different counties. And it happened to be at the headwaters of every watershed down the Sierras. When you took a map of the Sierras and the origins of the water, it was a line. Somehow these frogs only live where the water comes from. Magically, that's left after the smelt, remember, has cut off the rest from the delta and the riverways. So this would effectively shut down all the mining, the rest of the grazing operations, and the rest of the ag that's left. But what they did is they learned their lessons after a few big losses last year. They called up, we jumped on it. The first thing the agency said, we're not giving you extension, and we know that none of you know anything about this, but we're also only going to give you 30 days to comment. So the first thing we did was got them an extension. And not only was it 20 or 30 days in June, it's clear till this Thanksgiving for people to comment on. Then we went in and tore apart their science, and it was pretty easy. First step, they said they didn't have to do joint public hearings with the counties and local governments. It's a requirement of law. So I wrote the letters for the Sheriff Mims, Fresno County, DeAugustini in El Dorado County, Haney in Trinity County, Del Norris, Dean Wilson, and then Sheriff Mike Poindexter in Modoc. They sent them in. We forced them into a corner to hold in the hearings where the people live, not in Washington, D.C. So then the outcry was, 9-1 in favor of the rural folks and against this little plan. So that got on the public record with the congressman sitting there. Then we wrote the commentary for 3 mining engineering firms, 2 big agricultural producers, and then those sheriff offices and counties as well. And now the agency's like, oh wait, maybe we had some flaws. We want to rewrite our plan. Okay? They were just going to have a slam dunk case, grab 2.1 million acres and all the water. And the reason being is they had critical flaws in their plan as usual. They admitted in their own book, if you made it through hundreds of pages, that their agency and the funding they're giving to the state agency to drive around and plant new species, that they had infected all the ponds up and down the Sierra Nevadas, their own program, with this fungus from Africa. And this fungus is what appeared to be killing all these frogs. So their own trucks driving through rivers and streams was spreading it out there tinkering around, but they didn't tell the counties that. They didn't tell the ranchers that, of course. You had to go way back in the book to find it. So I think we've got that one shut. But you're going to see right here, like this one, this right here is simply an offshoot. See right here, this chub? This is simply an offshoot of the Delta smelt chub in California. It's just a renaming of it. So it's like the loach minnow and spiked dace. And there it is, Idaho, Nevada, Utah. And that's for next year. So you can go through this chart, and if you go to this column here, this is in your little folder stuff that Darren has. You can click this arrow, and you could select like, we'll pick on nice people. So Arizona, and you could go way down here, and click on Utah, and get what's just coming in your state, if you want. And that's just what's pre-planned, not what they'll come up with, like the yellow-legged frog that someone just came up with in June. Okay, so this will show you right here what's coming in just our 2 states. Now you guys are pretty lucky in the sense of you've got this chub, but when it comes out, if it's like the Delta smelt, which it is, and this one, both these right here, see, they're doing 2 filings, one for primary critical habitat, and one for full uplisting and critical habitat, both 14 and 15, right here in Utah. I can certainly dang near guarantee you, and then the pink sand dune tiger beetle. That's this year.
That's been in the process
Yeah.
for what?
Yeah, several.
And if they lose, they'll
20 years?
rename it. Yeah, if they lose, they'll rename it. But this chart is their chart of what they agreed to avoid litigation. They are going to publish a final management plan by the end of this fiscal year. Or this year, I should say, calendar year. Yes, sir.
Do you have any documentation that they've taken a species and renamed it and resubmitted it before?
Yeah, the deer and meadow mouse are simply now the New Mexico jumping mouse. And they're really both Preble's mouses. Mouses. Mises, yeah. And the Preble's was defeated on the Gila. The Forest Service even came out against it because it was killing the allotments around the Gila. And in New Mexico, the Arizona cattle growers whipped it. Then it came back out as the meadow. Then that got whipped. And that was right in our backyard.
And on these relists, are there frequently those threats of litigation that?
It's almost all of them.
And is that documentable?
Oh, it's been proven in the Senate. There's been hearings on it. And in fact, in the most recent hearings, the Director Ash of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, now this is our senator's fault, not his fault. The Senate panel who's investigated it is on their 3rd letter to him saying, we've already seen all the evidence that you are doing backroom deals with no publication, no court hearings, no comments. We demand you come and talk to our panel. And he's refused them 3 times. Now think about this. An appointed bureaucrat is snubbing our elected Senate, like the most powerful body in the world. You know, and they're just sitting there letting it happen. So that's why I say the Senate's as much his fault as he is. I mean, he needs to get pistol whipped or something.
I don't want to take any more of your time. I'll maybe follow up with you on the second.
Sure, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. And then also, this is my supervisor here, Supervisor Weller. I told you when you called me that would be here. So you'll want to talk to him too as well, please, and change cards and all that. So,
Hey, Doyel.
uh-huh.
So I asked Brian if he would come up from Garfield County. I know you've looked at what they've done as far as their grazing zone.
Yeah.
Their resolution and what they're trying to do to protect their ranchers, producers. What's your take on everything that they've done so far?
I think that Brian, and I think a lot of it rests on his shoulders for the county as a body, has done excellent work. I mean, the fact that we drug around the field and wrote out a timber management plan, because the the agencies have a mandate from Congress that in the top 10 priorities in America is supposed to be range restoration, watersheds, and native grasses. Well, let's get to it and let's start bringing them back. And one of those ways is productivity and timber harvesting and quit burning stuff up. Now, I was to understand in Fort Worth from Mr. Pollock, Commissioner Pollock, that some action they were going to proceed forward with, they decided not to because they thought they might hurt their neighbor counties. And I didn't understand that. Not that decision, but what the topic was. That's what he said in Fort Worth at NACO.
That had to do with prairie dogs.
Okay, prairie dogs, okay.
You know, that had to do with prairie dogs, and that particular one, we actually had an ordinance in place that put federal and state agents at risk of being arrested if they allowed prairie dogs to get onto private property. And although it was very aggressive, and we think we have the legal right to do it, they came to the table and tried to work other things out with us, and so we've agreed to table that ordinance. But what Darren, I think, is talking about, for those of you that don't know, we worked with Representative Noel and others last legislative session and had the majority, in fact, all of the monument and a few portions of the Dixie National Forest designated as the Escalante grazing zone and designated as an area of cultural and historic significance due to the grazing activity that was there, and that the highest and best use of that land is grazing. Then we followed that up. We have a detailed cultural resources protection ordinance that allows us to have a register of historic and cultural places, historic and cultural landmarks, and historic and cultural outstandingly remarkable, relevant, important values. And we put it on our register of significant cultural and historic places. Activities, we also do activities, and so we put grazing on that in the monument, basically, as a historically and culturally significant. We tied the language to the monument proclamation, which protects certain elements, and we equated those in the document. So now as they go through their grazing EIS, they have to justify why they would be destroying a value of historic and cultural significance, and also that is protected by the monument proclamation. And then we also tied it to legal authority, making it a criminal offense. It's really interesting when you use your health, safety, and welfare, and you use your local ordinances, and you make these criminal offenses as opposed to just saying you're going to take them to court and sue them. The federal managers are very, very hesitant to put their people at risk. When you say, I'll arrest you, and they say, well, you'll never stick. You say, that's fine, but it's going to be my county sheriff that's arresting you. You're going to be arraigned before our county justice of the peace. You'll spend the night in our county jail. When you go to court, you'll be before the county, in the county courthouse, and you may win, but the next time we'll arrest you again, it will be in the same situation, and they will do that. Now, I don't say that antagonistically. It goes back to what Doyel said about jurisdiction, though. Who really has jurisdiction? And that custodial jurisdiction, or proprietorial, as it's often called, if you will look at it in those writings that he put up there, they will say that that is the same jurisdiction as any landowner has. It's just land ownership. And when you stop and think about that, the federal regulations are really no different than the rules I have at my house, where I say to my girls, you're not going to do this. If you do, this is what's going to happen. They're just managing their property. They still are subject to health, safety, and welfare of the others. So that's what we've done, some things like that. We came up with an ordinance regarding protection of grazing resources and applied it in that grazing zone and call it a Class B misdemeanor if you destroy grazing resources in that zone without complying with the county plan. You can set up criteria. He talked about critical habitat and stuff, and so with some of our potential special species, we've identified that there is no critical habitat, because right now there is none in Doyel County. In fact, I don't think there's really any designated by U.S. Fish and Wildlife in Utah, if I remember correctly. And we said, if you're going to designate critical habitat, you have to go through this step, this step, this step, this step, and this step in order to, and you have to meet this criteria, which they won't be able to. So really what we're doing is trying to set up ordinances, county plans, documents that then we could tier with his jurisdiction and say you have to meet this in order to do this, to try and place several other hurdles before you even get to which one Doyel's is.
Yeah.
And then, but his is key. You have to do it under what he's talking about, and without his, it really wouldn't carry any weight.
Health, safety, and welfare is the key. And we've got a different name for something we're developing right now, and it's not like hidden, but I would prefer to refine it more before we go emailing it all over. We're calling it like a county NEPA. Basically, it's just, here's this mini NEPA, we're calling it. It's our Apache County one, and we've got other counties willing to do it, so we're not left out in the wind. Like on the gates, where we made it a crime, like you say, we had it on the books. It's this Class 2 misdemeanor. It's punishable by this. If you block any roads or put up any gates and lock them, or do water bars, etc., and block our access to the forest and the grazing. This is kind of the same thing. It's the same exact thing. It's just calling it mini NEPA. If you live up to all these things, which are part of the county land use plan, and it's a part of our county, then you go ahead. But until you meet all these things, don't just come in declaring nothing.
And that ties back to what he showed up earlier, where it said that, you know, if you actually have more restrictive regulations than the federal government does, they have to, I think it was in California, showed that where they have to comply with your environmental law, back in that military law.
Yeah, military law review. Let me show that.
What you're actually doing is you're writing your county NEPA. I hate that term too, by the way.
Yeah.
You're writing your county plan, and you're saying you got to reach this level, and then you can apply some of the stuff you're doing. And it forces the federal agencies to deal with you on that basis. And if not, you have a claim against consistency and failing to comply with county law. And if you tie it to criminal things, it just gives you a ton more weight to walk in there, because they know we don't have the money to sue them on every little thing. But when you say, but I'm going to come and I'm going to arrest your guy, and I'm going to arrest you for being a conspirator in it, Mr. Manager, they sit up and pay attention. In fact, with prairie dogs, they said to us, we will do absolutely nothing with prairie dogs. We won't even let anybody from Fish and Wildlife or Forest Service or anybody with prairie dogs, UDWR in your county. We'll keep them out if you adopt that ordinance, because we won't put them at risk.
Yeah.
We don't want our guys sitting in your jail even overnight.
That could be very risky, especially in Garfield County.
Yeah. Here's that one you spoke of that we went through earlier in the slides from that. But there were several reviews. This is just one of the better ones, the military law review from '91. But that is the reason why, for instance, since we can prove that the federal management agencies are destroying our air and our water when they claim to be protecting it, the science is there. This is why I had really harped on my state legislature for like the last 4 years to put some stricter standards. And our recent forest plan revision that was published, when they got to air quality specialist report, they gave a bunch of mumbo jumbo and then summarized it. It was the smallest report of all, even though we just went through the record-setting wildfire. Said, and then we've complied with all Arizona Department of Environmental Quality air standards. because they have to. I mean, they said it in their own report. But the thing is, I feel our state isn't holding them to a high enough bar, is the whole problem. We need to put the clamp on them.
That statement where it says subject to state environmental requirements, well, we have authority, the counties have authority dictated to us from the state. And when FLIPCO was created, there was a lot of discussion, and in it, one of the responsibilities of FLIPCO is to help create and maintain a state plan in consultation and cooperation. I think that's a quote of the state law, with local plans. And so as I helped draft it, and originally it said compiled of county plans, so they just take yours and put Pine County chapter, Sevier County chapter, and the legislature wouldn't let that fly, but they did say in cooperation and consultation. And so by state law, you can go and say, here's my county plan. I want you, state, to be consistent with that too. I want you to consult and cooperate with me on it. And so that's how you fulfill what he had up there. And Doyle's done a great job. It really gave us the clout and the power to drive some of these things home.
Doyle, would you discuss, you mentioned number 4, proprietary, as they're listed, and it's basically to the states.
Yeah, the states retain all legislative jurisdiction.
What role does the state have in what the county is setting out to do?
What role does the state have in...
Since it's delegated to the states.
Well, here's the problem, is that as what's become the norm is the states, and it's just, they're not even doing their role, is what it comes down to. I don't know how else to put it. Okay, they retained the jurisdiction and the responsibility to protect the health, safety, and welfare.
Well, as counties, do we have to go say, Mother, may I?
No.
That works in Arizona.
Well, I think you can make it work here.
I think that's where the state plan is done in consultation and cooperation with the counties. And just like the feds don't have a plan for the Dixie right now on wolves.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't have a plan for wolves. If we go out and write one, neither does the state. If we go out and write one for the Dixie in Garfield County for wolves, that becomes the only plan that's out there. That becomes the basis of consistency and everything else. And now you go to the state and you say, here is my plan, do you have any problems with it? You have to be proactive.
Yes, that's the
and
key.
Run out ahead of what's going on.
I'd like Supervisor Weller to talk to our predator ordinance, and when we went down to, when it was passed, we had to go to WIR, but then where I met, but then we had the next week we went to notice all the agency heads, and he can speak to that. It was crazy.
It was fascinating. I was concerned, maybe Doyle wasn't so concerned that we would just be saying, oh, this is illegal, get out of here, you're a county, we're not listening to you. Each meeting was set up for about a half an hour with the Department of Agriculture, the governor's office. Each meeting went well over 2 hours. They had their attorneys sitting there, never said a word. Just said, you could see the wheels turning. They know that we're right. And it's just time to stand up. That's all there is to it.
So you have to educate them.
It is. It was a matter of education. And it's still a matter of education. It scares them all because it's standing up to the federal government. But they're starting to pay attention.
We went through that with the prairie dogs. When we wrote our prairie dog ordinance, we were called to the woodshed at the governor's office with DWR attorneys and attorney generals and Mike Maurer and several others. And the first half an hour we were chewed out. The next 45 minutes the county stood up for itself and says, well, you're going to be with us as partners or what? We'll take the chewing out. We're going to move forward. At that point they sat down and say, hey, let's be partners. They came to us and asked us, we really prefer you table this ordinance and let's work a different way. But the state came in and became our partners in it. And because of that, we're doing some things that we think are going to move that whole issue forward. And although prairie dog isn't grazing and isn't other things, it's the same concept that you're going to have to apply to managing your forests, to sage grouse, to increasing, getting rid of pinyon juniper and returning stuff with sagebrush steppe and other things so that you have more grazing opportunities. They're all that, and nothing is really done in a vacuum. But I want to say one thing, and that is what Doyel's talking about is talking about work. And if you're just going to bluster and bluff, it isn't going to work. At some point, you're going to have to be willing to go to the mat and do whatever it takes to win. Because if you're not, they'll know that first off, the first time they push on you and you tip over, and then it's wasted. And it can't just be, oh, I'm just going to throw this out there. You have to think, you have to do the research, you have to do your homework. You notice all the studies that Doyel's done. And that's the difficulty, and that's really where we can come together, is where we can pool our resources and have a sage grouse plan that works for everybody, because we've got enough resources to do it. But it won't work. If you ever talk with Doyel, he'd rather fight you than agree with you. He really would. And so you got to have a little streak of that in you.
Well, yes, sir. Back here, he's been
I
waiting.
just wanted to say I dealt with federal agencies all my life. I'm a rancher with BLM, Forest Service. And I've only learned of one person that they'll back down from. You mentioned the sheriff, and they'll disappear. Without the sheriff, they'll take you apart in no time. There's a man, I don't know if you guys know him or not, Clive Bundy, down there in Mesquite, Nevada. He's been ranching for 20 years. He divorced the BLM, and they tried to put him out of business on that desert tortoise. He's still there today, ranching, and he says all he has to do is when Clark County, that's Las Vegas, elects a new sheriff, he has to inform the sheriff of what his duties are. He said, and that's all Bundy does, and he says they leave him alone. And he don't only deal with the BLM, he deals with the Park Service there too. Two agencies, and he's done it for 20 years. With the sheriff, he said all he has to do is tell the sheriff he has to protect his rights, his property. What I'm saying is there's a man that's done it for 20 years. And I'm sure if they could have got him out there, they'd had him. But all I want to say is that's your power. These counties is your county government and your sheriff, and I don't think you'll ever equip any of them at the state level or the federal level. You're going to come right back here to the base.
Yeah, and we have a Jim Chilton down in the Yuma over the tortoise. Just a different tortoise. They renamed it. He not only is still there, but he won $7 million off of them for their harassment. And he's down south of Yuma, Jim Chilton. And in fact, he turned around and the damn agency had to acknowledge it, and he got Habitat Rancher of the Year or some damn thing last year. But he turned it right back on him. But the county's where it's going to sit, I'm telling you, because them state people turn over with the wind oftentimes. And every new emergency is like the new disaster of the day to follow. You know, right now we got to worry about how are we going to implement Obamacare. But the simple fact is everybody in this room is who's working every day and buying that gas and making that sales tax, and that is working and keeping everything going. It all starts here. Those state guys, in a lot of cases, could really care less, because many of them are only grooming themselves for the next promotion, and then they're not going to be in that slot anymore. But these counties are your neighbors. These are the guys down the street.
I think in the state of Utah, a lot of that authority has been advocated to the counties. The sheriff, that's by state law. That's always been the case. But a lot of things, the responsibility of mental health, public health, a lot of those other things that we're talking about, you use as tools here, has been given to the counties by the state. So I think all we've got to do is, if the state's the problem, is go back and show them that they've given that authority to us, and we're going to use that authority.
And I think you need to not only do that in concert with lots of counties, you know, across state lines, because you have allies in Colorado that I know personally, obviously in Arizona, and New Mexico, and Nevada, and on and on and on. And until the state legislators and governors start getting the hint, we're not going to get anything fixed, because that's exactly how it's the 10th Amendment created what's called since the founders and framers to now, police powers of the state. And that's how it was. The state and its political subdivisions, the counties, could create needful laws and regulations to protect the health, safety, welfare, and morals of their citizens. It's all boils down to that. But until we flex our muscle and do it as counties, then we're not going to get anywhere. In other words, I'm saying don't count on them state agencies to do it, because like I showed you, and I only showed you because we're in Utah. My state is just as bad or worse, or I don't know, maybe the same. But I showed you those state agencies getting those permits to move endangered species around. Well, every time they move one of them around, now there's a new body of water that's critical habitat. Your own agencies. So until the counties here and us and all over say stop it, don't do it anymore.
Well, what I'm saying is I don't think we need the state's blessing. I think they've already given us the authority.
Yeah.
And we do have some people in the state legislature that seem to think it's got to come through the state. I think they've already given us the authority.
Yeah, I agree.
And hence the reason that I invited all of you instead of just inviting the folks here in Paiute County, because I think what Doyle's talking about is that, you know, if we stand on an island, we're, you know, not nearly as powerful as if we stand together, and that's why.
Yeah, but the fishing's better if you're on the island.
That's true. That's exactly why, you know, I invited all of these counties to be here to kind of hear this together. So, well, we told you we'd be out of here at 2:30. I'm sure Doyle will stay as long as you want for questions and answers. You guys got questions or any thoughts, ideas, concerns that you
I want
guys?
to say one thing.
Okay.
The state of Utah, and this is to all you commissioners, it's not run by you commissioners at this time. Who it's run by is the Division of Wildlife Resources. They tell the Forest Service what they can do. They tell the BLM what they can do. And they answer to nobody. Nobody answers.
You.
Huh?
They answer to you.
Well, they'll answer to you if you stick up to you for your own rights. But when the county commissioners say, hey, we're not gonna let our grazers be ate up by wolves or coyotes or cougars, put bounties on that, take care of the predators, and the biggest predator in the state of Utah is the elk. At this time, right now, elk and cougars. So you're the guys that can do it. You can put the pressure where it's got to go. But where it's got to go is right back to Mr. Governor up there, because he's the only one that has any say with the fish and game. But they're the ones that run the state.
There's a lot of truth in that because of what I read. I check Garfield all the time, and since Brian and Mr. Pollock and them and Darren was there, has had me up there to Garfield. I check all the time and watch them to try to give them tips when I find stuff in the Federal Register. Like that, moving endangered species around a new spot so that there's new critical habitat. I'm routinely, and then like when we were there in your building and found that designation none of us knew about downtown from some outside thing. Your state is like ours, and they're constantly in there badgering you behind your back. You don't even know it. And your own Fish and Game has done sold you out, or your own Department of Revenue, or whoever. I mean, think about that right now. The 11 largest, most productive grazing allotments in Arizona are in our county. Proven fact. And the Forest Service has to come show us from a meeting the documentation that our Game and Fish is willing to take grant money from the Bureau of Reclamation to plant endangered species and make all that critical habitat. If you destroy the 11 most productive grazing areas in the state of Arizona, and all 11 are in our county, what do you think is going to happen to livestock in our county? Kerry Dobson is a famous sheep family. Dobson Boulevard, one of the fancy drives in Phoenix, is named after his family. He's had to give up his sheep operation after 3 generations and stick just to calves. He can't take meat anymore. But he's the guy that's spending the money there that keeps those counties and towns rolling. And maybe too at the end, I mean, I know it's huge, but Supervisor Weller's been all over with me. And if he had any words too, we're trying to make a team thing. We have to. I mean, I could be at home reloading right now. Trust me, and Mr. Weller knows I'd rather be doing that. Okay, but we're passionate. I took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, when I was in the Army. And domestic's our biggest threat. I'm telling you. And when I was young and stupid and earned them medals, I took it seriously when I came home, and I realized that what I thought I was fighting for in the Middle East, we were losing right here in our own backyard. So if we team up, I won't have to go on the road as much, and I can reload more. So. Huh?
Just one
Oh, yes, sir.
comment. The other day I was listening to the RAC meeting, and Stanton Gleave was one of those that made a comment there, but I mean, he basically was one of those that just, I listened over the internet, but he's just like a guy in line there to make his comment. 3 or 4 of them were people that I'm sure they were just representing environmental groups, and some of them stated they were, and they asked questions that they knew that they couldn't answer, and they were happy with that. I mean, they got what they wanted there, I think, on record. And then Stanton made his comment that, you know, here he was, the guy who actually had grazing rights on the mountain. You know, they were talking about putting mountain goats here on the table range, Dutton range. And here he is just one of many that are allowed to make a comment. Really, he had a right, but they should be coming to him first. The Fish and Game should sit down with those that have the grazing rights and say, what do you think about this? We're going to affect your right, your established right, the same right as if, you know, the people acquired property right. I mean, it's just completely equal. He has that right that they've had for years and years.
Yeah,
and
generations,
years. And yet, he comes before the Fish and Game as just a beggar, like everybody else with a comment. You know, I mean, that's the way that he was treated.
Yeah.
I felt like.
Well, they don't treat him as having a right.
No, they don't treat him as having a right, and all these other people are there trying to acquire a right that they don't have.
What they're trying to do is turn the republic into a democracy, you know, where the vote or the republic outrules
the rights.
the right, yeah, and this whole country's established on rights.
Yeah.
Water rights, property rights, grazing rights, mineral rights, and if we can't defend those, then we just will give up.
Don't give up.
No, but yeah, you're right, because democracy, remember, used to be defined even in the U.S. government training manuals for the military. Point blank said democracy is equal to mobocracy. That's what they were taught in basic training. I have a copy of the manual. That was clear up until Korea. And then that all got gutted as we have to do this shift and make everybody think different in this country. I mean, it's a good, strong attack. It's not just against livestock and timber that we're under attack from, but I think Mr. Weller and Darren and Brian and, well, everybody in this room knows where we need to go. We either hang together or we hang separately. It rings as true today as it did when we were founded. And that transfer of public lands is utterly critical. Full divestiture of the lands from the Fed to the states. But at the same time, and Ken has been in my house and we've argued all night on it in my own living room. But I don't think we should be blind to the fact that we've got a lot of state agencies that aren't necessarily very friendly to us. And we ought to be prepared to deal with it. We better be prepared to take over a bunch of lands and have a bunch of industries that have been crushed, and we don't. The knowledge is gone. I mean, I'm not picking on nobody, but we don't exactly have very many young people in this room. And when we went to cutting and the mills tried to reopen, they ran into Simpson couldn't haul what we needed to haul. And here we are cutting record levels as a county, or instigating it. We're not cutting any of it. All private contractors on property to reduce fuel loads. The entire Northern California bragged that last year, the NRCD for the whole Northern California bragged 200 acres cut. We've cut 500 acres since the snow melted this year. Okay? On private properties that needed help because the forest on the other side of the fence wouldn't maybe, or the state wouldn't keep their property safe. Okay? And heck, we can't hardly find qualified people to cut. We're going to have to reinvigorate. We're not just going to magically get the lands from the Fed and remember how to mine and log and expect all the agencies just to help us along at Salt Lake or in Phoenix or wherever. So,
you know, Randy Phillips at WIR made the comment. The Forest Service has lost over 30% of their personnel that no timber. He says I don't think we could come back and fully staff some of it.
I don't think they could. You take my area, we've got, okay, we're the home, and the case literally of like where I live, not just the county, is not only a forest supervisor, but also district ranger's office, both in my town. And in the 70s, the whole thing was ran by a handful of people. And now those two buildings have over 100 people. Yet when I go to fire and fuels team to work on these projects, like you saw pictures of this morning and stuff, and many other projects too, with those guys, there's 3 of them. There's 3 people out of the whole supervisor and ranger offices combined that do fire and fuels. And Range Con is one guy for 2.1 million acres. Yet they've got, I don't know how many fish biologists.
So what do the rest of them do?
Fish biology.
They prepare for litigation.
Yeah.
And fight litigation. For the Forest Service, 52% of their budget is spent on preparing for litigation.
Yeah. No, they do. They just keep the machine turning. It's like our country and the agencies are like the squirrel little cage is still turning, but the squirrel's dead. Okay? So, I don't know
Now
how.
he's a zombie.
Yeah, so.
Are you gonna have a flash drive that we can get from you of this stuff?
Yeah, either that or I can put it all in a Dropbox folder and then give you the access to it. That's probably the easiest way, because not everybody's got a flash drive here.
Yeah.
So,
And I want to thank you guys for organizing this, because this is complicated stuff. Unless you have kind of a template or a guide, you know what your options are, it takes this sort of thing. Have you thought about putting this together in one of those cookbook deals? How to?
You know, actually, I published 2 books already. One was on the states, and it was verified by several PhDs in the UC system, because I wrote it years ago. The states being separate and sovereign, I have 600 Supreme Court cases in there proving it. Then I did one on the land patents and allodial titles, and I'm coming out with a new book. It's kind of like all of this gibberish shoved into a manual, and my better halves gave me the theme of it's going to be like Jurisdiction for Dummies. Like those funny yellow and black books, but we're going to call it Jurisdiction for Dummies. And kind of, you know, because
I volunteer to read drafts or help with editing if you'd like.
Good, because
I think it's a real powerful.
why don't you guys sign that?
Well, and I think so too.
Everybody info to where this is all at.
Hey, Doyle.
Yes, sir.
Did the Forest Service go back in and build all the fences back, or did?
No, what we did was there's a thing called a BEAR team. After any fire in America, it's Burned Area Emergency Response. And that's where your rats come from, I showed you earlier. Well, they come in from Washington, and imagine they have this unlimited checkbook of yours for the first 3 months. And then for the next 3 months after that, they've got a little bit of a checkbook, and after a year, don't even bother asking. So the first things we did was got 26 water monitoring stations that are like wireless. So any water tables, streams and everything, or flooded even just box canyons, it sends the sheriff's department on their phones. So South Fork raised an inch, get those people out of that area, because that means it's going to be 3 foot in about 30 minutes. The fencing, we made them take all that out of the BEAR money. See, they were going to put it into new trucks typically and new studies. Ours went to the ground. It went to those mapping guys to get roadside. And we set a national record for it, post-fire, roadside salvage. It's never been matched. I don't think it will be for a while. I hope it doesn't get matched. If somebody gets to that point of burning that much as we did, but the fencing all came out of that money. The supervisor and the range cons were on board with this. They said, point blank, that's our problem. Those fences burned down. Hundreds of miles of stays and everything to be replaced. And that fire burned so hot there was leaned over T-post. I mean, it was insane, that fire.
Who did the actual work?
All private. It's just all bid systems. So I know a young man that Huh? No, even private could come in and bid if a rancher chose. So like this one young man didn't have the bidding number. The Fed requires for anything for you to have a DUNS number, Duns and Bradstreet, okay? So what we did was the local community college, there's a little gal in there, 2 gals, Melissa and, I can't remember the other one's name now, but Molly. They came and we organized them in the town city hall on 3 different weeks in a row, and any local could come in and for free. They walked them through on their computer and got you a DUNS number. So some young men have turned it into a business now. They went out and got help. They got a Bobcat. They got with the post hole digger attachment, and we're putting up miles of fence because it's running to like 26,000 a mile. So and all that rock. I don't know how your soil is here, but it's pretty rocky where we're at 7,000 plus everything in elevation. But then the ranchers. Now, some ranchers, what they did is Wink Kriegler, a friend of mine, ex-Diamond Ranch, she's since 1880, their family. They've got 32 sections. She just had her hands do it. And you drove down to the Forest Service, created a yard, and it was endless pallets of strand and stays and T-posts. And then you said, I'm going to do this allotment today, and they knew that, okay, that's going to need 9 miles. So all these pallets over here are yours. Start picking them up, and they put labels on them. And she just gave her hands tons of hours. She pays them by the hour on that ranch. So, and then some didn't want to touch it, and so it just went out to private contractors. But I think that's way better than the Fed doing it anytime. You know, having the local ranch or a young man do it, that they provided every bit of the materials. And then in the meantime, they also put up all that, like the sheep rope that's electrified they use, so that they didn't hold anybody off their rotations. With the excuse that the fence is down, they put up all the temporary, and they got extra money in. Then we got Arizona Elk Foundation, brought in $250,000 of feed and labor for fencing. And some big machines to put in that blew those T-posts in like a 30-06 blank. Drove it like just out of a rifle barrel into the ground. So a lot of people pulled up because the Arizona elk know that a lot of their good elk hunting is due to the ranching, keeping the place neat. I mean, otherwise it'd be just an overgrown thicket.
Hey, we've got to sneak out.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right,
Thank you.
Doyel.
Hey, now I'm going to see you up north.
Got questions for Doyel? I'm sure he'll stay as long as you want to ask questions.
Thanks, Doyel.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Doug. Doug, you'll be up north, Doug?
Yeah.
Thanks.
They're on Tuesday night,
Yeah.
and Thursday. I'm with the Heritage Foundation.
Are you? Okay.
Doyel, one good step for Arizona would be to put its game department under the executive. It's a standalone commission.
It's a commission, yeah.
They don't report to the governor.
Yeah, I know.
So that's a monster.
I know. You're right. Well, another idea is that it'd be hard to do because even I like to go hunt and fish, but we just need to quit giving them money. But you won't get everybody to not buy a tag
Yeah,
next
but
year.
you guys got the lottery and you pour money into them every day.
Well, I don't anymore.
You don't?
I did quit, yeah.
You know, I stopped doing the lottery too when I realized one of the math friend of mine told me, you have just as good a chance to win by going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I said, I get it.
No, it's the truth. Thank you, sir.